All right, so now we're going to talk about mixed methods. And mixed methods, well, we're going to talk about the basic principles, advantages, constraints. We're going to talk about how you can evaluate quality of mixed methods and how you can use mixed methods in social work practice. So mixed methods generally tends to refer to the idea of using both quantitative and qualitative data. So I've seen mixed methods terminology used in other contexts. Even within qualitative methods, for example, I've seen people say that they're using mixed methods when they use interviews and ethnography and maybe some sort of archival research where they're looking at documents. But generally when people say mixed methods, they're referring to something where research that uses both qualitative and quantitative data together. And one core principle of mixed methods is that it integrates this different data in ways that highlights the advantages of both or multiple research approaches. So again, it's that integration that's really key to mixed methods. So one of the core advantages of mixed methods is that it combines benefits of both qualitative and quantitative approaches. So we know some of the benefits of qualitative research is that it's in-depth. It provides the ability to look at complex phenomenon. Quantitative approaches, though, tend to allow for generalizability, and you can extrapolate from one particular research project. You can make assumptions, or you can try to basically explain and generalize the results to a broader population beyond just what you actually researched. So with mixed methods, you often get the benefits of both. So some of the constraints and critiques of mixed methods is that if it's not integrated, it can seem clunky and really fail to meet its goals. So good mixed methods is really going to be, again, integrated, meaning that it's not just going to look like two different research projects just kind of lumped together in one paper. There has to be a reason to why they're using both, and there has to be a reason. For mixed methods, it really needs to show that one buttresses the other, one supports the other, they both support each other. So another constraint with mixed methods is time limitation. So producing research that is both qualitative and quantitative can take additional time, although sometimes qualitative research is very time consuming. So on the other hand, sometimes mixed methods that uses a little less qualitative and combines some quantitative components to it can actually maybe be a little less time consuming. So it depends on how the researcher has approached the mixed methods. But another constraint or potential limitation is that because it's an integration method, you may lose some of the full in-depth analysis that you would get with a purely qualitative research project. But again, that might be offset by some of the benefits that you're getting. So how do you evaluate the quality of mixed methods? The core thing to really pay attention to, which is the integration. So does the mixed methods approach make sense? Why did the researcher actually do both of this qualitative and component? Why did they use both of these approaches? There's a tendency among some researchers to use both approaches in a way that is not necessarily integrated, but more sort of like, for example, you might have a qualitative researcher who's done a lot of really great in-depth interviews and then does like a demographic survey of their participants, and that's not really mixed methods. That's really a demographic survey that's providing some context that's helpful for the interview. So if the person in the article describes that as mixed methods, I would look a little bit more carefully with the methods, and it might be a little bit of a red flag. In the contrast, you might have a researcher who's using mostly like survey data, and then maybe does like 2 interviews with 2 participants to try to understand one particular aspect about a question. I suppose that might be mixed methods because they are doing some interviews, but 2 interviews is really not going to get the kind of in-depth analysis that you want to get with a really truly integrated mixed methods project. So again, you're going to evaluate the mixed methods article by looking at the purpose and the coherence and the integration of the research itself. So now there's different ways that you could use mixed methods in your research. For this example, I'm not going to actually, for this slide, I'm not actually going to give the hypothetical again, because I want us to think a little bit more about mixed methods as an approach, which is a little different than the methods that we've described previously. So with mixed methods, you could use a mixed methods research article. If you're engaged in policy, for example, mixed methods can provide some really rich data, some numbers, but it can also provide experiences and stories and understandings about how people make sense of the phenomenon that the numbers are describing. So the great thing about mixed methods is if you, let's say, for example, you are really interested in Medicaid policy. And Medicaid in the United States, for example, is a policy that provides health care and options for folks who, for a variety of reasons, there can be maybe lower income, and there could be some folks that are eligible for Medicaid based on their ability or disabilities. So anyway, so let's say that you're a social worker who's really interested in policy that gets people health care, especially if they're living in poverty. And mixed methods, you might be able to look at a mixed methods article that looks at how, maybe it looks at survey data of how many people who are under a certain income threshold actually are able to gain access to health care. And that's really useful information. Or it may actually be a survey that provides information about who is more likely to have, like what are the characteristics of people who are more likely to be, who are more likely to take advantage of a policy that allows for some sort of health coverage, right? If they're under a certain income threshold. So that's really useful data. But let's say the data shows you that there's a particular group that does not take advantage of this healthcare policy for whatever reason. And maybe it's based on combination of, let's say, social support, there's some sort of infrastructure issue, so maybe they don't have access to, it's harder to get access to people, like maybe they have transportation limitations, so it's harder to get access driving to places where they have to fill out a form or something like that. And so you might not get that information from a survey, whereas if you have interviews, you might be able to get that information that's driving the why and the under what circumstances is someone going to be able to actually take advantage of this policy, and what are some of the reasons behind internally why someone might not actually take advantage of this particular policy. And that then can help you create a better policy and make it so that more people can actually take advantage of health coverage, for example. If you're at a micro level, if you're a social worker who's working individually one-on-one with someone, mixed methods can help you understand what interventions are most effective and best to use in a particular situation. It also helps you understand a phenomenon from different lenses, which again can help drive caregiving and your ability to provide services to an individual in a way that takes advantage of the fact that you now have knowledge about the numbers, you have knowledge about how many people, for example, are not taking or not using this policy, and the groups of people in particular who are not using the policy. And so you know that this particular client that came in, you maybe need to spend a few extra minutes talking to that person to make sure they understand and know about this particular policy, especially if they're in that underrepresented group. And then the interviews might help you, from a mixed methods research article, might help you understand or think about what are some potential reasons why someone from that underrepresented group might be less likely to take advantage of this policy, or why they might be less likely to apply for health coverage under this policy. And so therefore, as an individual social worker, you now know, you have a little bit more information that might help you better serve that individual who's underrepresented. So those are different ways that mixed methods might actually apply and might help in your own social work practice, especially if you're looking at research articles that use mixed methods. All right, now we're going to talk about grounded theory. And as we learned earlier from the previous part of the module, is grounded theory is a methodology. So it's an approach. It's used to analyze qualitative data to understand social phenomena and develop theory. It uses data to develop theory more inductively. So again, so it's iterative. It's not something that you come to the research with a preformed hypothesis. An inductive process, you're going to begin with your question. You might be comparing smaller data units. So instead of having a group of 1,000 people and you're getting information from, you're looking more at 20, for example, or something much smaller even. So there's various types of approaches with grounded theory. I'm going to talk briefly about them and then talk about some of the advantages and constraints of grounded theory. So one approach, it looks at, basically the idea is that when someone is actually looking at or engaging in interviews or research or collecting data, that they develop these what are called theoretical codes, or they develop these ways to understand the data when reviewing it. And that's more inductive. It's an approach by someone named Glacier. There's a second approach by Strauss and Corbin that uses a more systematic approach that combines data sampling, analysis, and theory development. And it's, again, the differences between the two are more systematic. And the reason, this may seem kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of grounded theory, but the reason why I bring this up is because when you're looking at an article that uses grounded theory, sometimes researchers will combine these approaches when they discuss grounded theory, or they will not discuss them at all. And that's a red flag because they really are two different approaches. And so you'll want to see the research article make clear which approach they're using, and that you want to make clear that they've thought about which approach and that they're not just like citing a bunch of people that are using different approaches that suggest they don't really truly understand grounded theory. And the reason why we're discussing grounded theory is a really common form, it's a very common methodology that is used in qualitative research. And so it's important that if you come across this term when you're reading articles, that you understand what it means. So one of the big advantages of grounded theory is that it can help develop innovative theories. It also just generally provides an approach for qualitative research. One of the constraints is it's often a misunderstood purpose. So some researchers critique the research because it fails to provide causal connections. But again, this is a misunderstanding of the purpose of qualitative research. Researchers that are often immersed in deductive research, so research that's you have a hypothesis and then you conduct your research after that, they critique that it's inductive. But again, that's the point of grounded theory, and qualitative research actually, generally, is that it is more inductive often, in that you don't come to the table with a hypothesis, is that you develop the theory as you're going through the research. It's theory generating. And often these theories develop hypotheses that then can be used in some of the quantitative research. So grounded theory provides research that's, again, not generalizable, and that's a limitation of grounded theory methodology and methods that stem from using grounded theory. So just want to hit on a couple more bullet points about evaluating the quality. So again, if you're looking at you're looking at an article that's using grounded theory, you want to make sure that they really understand that they're using one or two, or even sometimes more approaches. That it's clear that they know, that they understand grounded theory, and that they're, again, not just doing a string cite of multiple authors, that may be actually using different methods or different approaches. You also want to make sure that if someone is using the word grounded theory, that they understand that it is kind of more of a philosophy of a way of conducting and going about qualitative research. It's not necessarily a method within itself. It's more of a methodology. And so that can help you understand the quality of an article that uses, or research that uses grounded theory, because it gives you a little insight into seeing, do they really even understand this concept that's used all over qualitative research articles. And so sometimes people will just throw it in and it doesn't really make sense. And so this will give you a sense of whether, the person who's using this term actually is using it correctly. And thus you can get more credibility. They have more credibility in the actual research itself.